Welcome to the App Advisory Show, your fortnightly dose of all things cloud accounting, apps, and app advisory.
Hi folks, welcome to the App Advisory Show. I'm delighted to have Ben Steele on of Steele Financial, who's a chartered accountant in the Bristol area. Hi Ben, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Matt. Not too bad.
Had a good week, month, COVID period.
That's a big question. Good week, yes. Good month, I think so. Good COVID, who knows?
Yeah, strange times. I think we'll look back. You have to look back over post-COVID when whatever the new normal kicks in and work out what sort of time it was for us all. I think it's really hard to ascertain whether it's been good, bad, indifferent, or just new,
or all of it.
Or whatever. So, Ben, we've known each other actually a few years, but we've probably lost touch for a couple of years in the middle, like long lost friends. But when I initially caught up with you, you were in a different firm, and then you've reached out and you've become your own firm over the last sort of 3-4 years. So tell us a bit about yourself and your firm currently.
Yeah, so started Steele Financial on my own. No clients, no bank account, no clue. And yeah, that was 2017. Formed the firm in 2017. Took about 4 months to actually decide what on earth I'm doing. So I think I formed the company in July and didn't start trading until October. Right. So we're just coming up to sort of 3 years of trading any time now. And as I said, started off on my own from a back bedroom, no clients, no bank account, and no sort of, roadmap, I guess, and just took it from there. And here we are almost 3 years on, and team of 5 and nice offices and lots of clients and hopefully a bit more of a clue.
well, we're never going to have the full clue, are we? It's going to just be an evolution of getting to that end point of having the clue. When we spoke in previous sessions that we've had together and things, you mentioned about the journey of going from that, going out of employment, starting your own firm, and then that lead. But without having, not bad mouthing, firms or anything like that. But I think when we met, you felt like a bit stagnated within the firm you're at. You could see where you could go either as a firm or as an individual. Because I think this will resonate with a lot of people, and now you're at a point where you're at that point of actually I need to just give this a go on my own. Was that how it felt for you?
Yeah, so I think as I was maybe the 2 years before I started my own firm, I think accountancy was very much in the point of still getting to understand what cloud accounting even was. Not many firms were using it. Apps certainly wasn't a thing back then, sort of going back 5-6 years ago maybe, and I always knew, I guess, leading up to that point that things could be done quicker and easier. And it always frustrated me. And I was always at the point of being told by managers and bosses, no, this is how we do it. You have to do this. You have to, scan and save everything 20 million times in different areas. And we had paper record. We used to have a basement at one of our firms with just rows and rows of filing cabinets. And we had one day a year where we had to all go down to this basement and just clear out anything more than 7 years old. And it was exhausting. So I always knew that things were very over the top, very unnecessary in a lot of ways, and it was always an annoyance. And then it was only sort of, I guess, a year before I started my firm, I was introduced to Xero, and it was still pretty new, I guess, 5-6 years ago to a lot of practices. And I had one of the Xero managers come into the office where I was a manager, and sort of trying to introduce it, trying to push it, and I was like, wow, this sounds great. I hadn't really used it much, but the boss at the time was, no, we use this. We use VT transaction, for those of you who knows what that is. VT, and that was our really modern software. That was our sort of go-to. And the more I then looked into it in my own time, the more I tried to push the odd client onto Xero, and instantly was finding actually this is great. But I was still getting a lot of pushback. And I guess, apart from some other reasons, that was one of the big ones which made me think, actually, I either need to find a firm who are willing to embrace this or already ahead of the game, and couldn't really find that position.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, what am I doing? I may as well do it for myself, and that's how it happened.
I think that's really interesting, because I think for the firms who have worked in a certain way for a period of time, that the alignment of getting people and processes and technology all aligned is, it's just a difficult job. It's not an overnight, or in comes a cloud accounting vendor and we all switch. There's a lot to it, isn't there? So I think that's really hard to get the alignment right for a lot of firms when they're going through that.
Yeah, and it was yeah, I've lost my point actually.
That's okay. I'm sure if it'll come back, we can pick up on it. Not a problem at all. So how was it then? So you had those like period of 3-4 months before when you went out, and then you started trading. Like how? I think this is really an interesting point for the people who are going through this, and maybe in the client acquisition period. Like how did you get your first 5 clients? Let's say, like, what did that come through? Was it a bit of referrals, a bit of networking? I think it's always interesting to find out if people got their first few clients in this world.
Yeah, so it was back when it was in maybe like the final 6 months of being a manager at the firm, and I was doing a lot of networking, and I was getting out there, and I was sort of trying to get people in the door of the practice I was managing, and I was doing that great. And the problem was they would come into the firm, I'd do my work, I'd get out there, get them into the office, and then we would fall down because, you know, we were just the same old practice. There was nothing special, and then we were losing those clients, and that became frustrating. And then when I started, I think I must have changed on LinkedIn that I was no longer at the firm and I'd started my own. And slowly these people I'd met in the previous 6 months started to contact me, find out what was happening. And we went from there. But I think the biggest thing that worked for me at that time was being a zero practice. So sort of 3.5 years ago, that was still, as I said, quite a newish thing. So it was quite rare. And these businesses who were proactive were looking for an accountant who knew zero. And that's how I was winning clients. You know, I was getting people saying, oh, you mentioned zero, and that's what we're looking to use. We've heard about this zero thing. And it went from there. And at the start, that was enough to sort of win me clients and get attention. Obviously, it's very different these days. It's hard to find a firm that aren't zero experts or cloud accounting experts. So it's a bit different now, and probably a bit tougher. I'd probably struggle now if I had to start from scratch in this day and age. So it's a little bit easier from that point of view. And also, I was probably doing everything wrong back then that I would get told off in every accountancy group I'm in at the moment. I'd probably be absolutely hammered by everybody because I was in the mindset at the start of I must accept everyone and anyone. I didn't turn anybody away. My fees were way too low. I wasn't in the mindset of, you know, they must be a good fit for me too. I had no money in the bank. The business account was empty. Every penny helped. Every penny counted. You know, to invest in these softwares and apps, I had to have money to buy them. So it was a bit of a catch-22. And, you know, some of those clients are still on board today. Some of them have naturally gone because of the change of the way we work here. But it was very much, you know, I was getting all of this advice from all these different areas. You know, you must find the ideal client. You must, you know, have a good fit both ways. Increase your fees, know your value, all the sayings that we hear today. But at the time I was like, do you know what? That's really easy for you to say, but I have to pay my mortgage somehow. So I'm just going to get anybody through the door at the moment.
I think as well, you go through an evolution of compatibility with business. I mean, I look back to, you know, maybe some of the clients that we had way back, you know, and there were nothing wrong, great people, got on well, but long-term compatibility probably wasn't there. But like you say, you can't see the long-term compatibility when you start. It's like the compatibility is they've got money and they're willing to spend some money with us, whether that's good return or bad return is indifferent. It's going to pay for the bills that I've got. So I do think you get into an evolution of compatibility with people.
Absolutely. You have to hit that. I found like probably about 12 months ago for me, there's a wall and you suddenly hit it and you get into that comfort zone of being, I don't know, I guess the big part, which not a lot of people like to speak about, is that financial comfort of saying, right, I'm now in a position where I can turn people away. And not necessarily turn them away, but, you know, as I said at the start, it was very much about flexing myself and the way I worked to however they needed it, as opposed to now they have to flex to fit the way we work if they're not already in that position. And there is a wall, and if you are new, I think just keep going. You will hit that wall where you suddenly have that comfort of being able to say, actually, this is how I work. This is how my practice works. and you either flex to fit that, or you're going to be better off suited to maybe a more traditional firm who still just accept anyone.
And so sort of fast forward to where you are now, how many staff have you got now?
So it's 5 full-time at the moment. We're probably fast approaching needing another one soon, but trying to drag that out as much as I can.
and how did you find the hiring? Was it again that wall that you spoke about, that comfort area where you thought, well, actually we've got some income coming in, we've got some clients who like sticky, and we seem to be making some margin on it, and now it's a good time to introduce somebody else to the business, as well as maybe be selective on who we're going to work with longer term? How was that for you, that first sort of higher point?
The first 12 months I was pretty much on my own, just trying to build any sort of foundation I could. And then I think it was about 12 months in, I actually hired an apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been, that's sort of part of my background is hiring trainees and apprentices. So my first sort of go-to was an apprentice who could do all of my admin, who could do lots of listing and bank recs and things like that to free up my time that I needed at that point. And then sort of maybe, I don't know, 6 to 8 months later, I was ready to take on another person, and I needed somebody a bit of a higher level to take off some more of my tasks. And I was in the lucky position where I think I'd put something on Facebook, and somebody I'd worked with about 6 years before noticed it and said, would I be allowed to apply? And we hadn't seen each other for 6 years, but I remembered, we got on, and she was really good at what she did. So I was just really lucky at that point. So no recruitment fees at that point either, luckily. And then I think my next hire was another ex-colleague of mine. So again, I put out recruitment. Again, she contacted me on Facebook. Hi, how have you been? It's been probably 2 years. Do you want to work together again? And so up until this sort of, I don't know, maybe about 3 months ago, I was very lucky in just having people I'd worked with and knew apply for the jobs, and it worked really well. And then my most recent recruit was only just after lockdown, around June. We took on a graduate. So has sort of some of that technical knowledge, but didn't have much experience. And post-lockdown was a really weird time. I guess we're still in it, but immediately post-lockdown, it was a weird time, and we believed it was going to be a good fit. And sort of 2.5 months in, it seems to be. So yeah, it's been a bit of a weird one for us.
Yeah, I suppose, well, that's the challenge of on board, because you guys have gone back in the office, and you relatively quickly, you got back into the routine of using the office.
Yeah, in middle of May, actually, we were straight back, the whole team. Yeah.
Does that work well?
Yeah, I mean, lockdown, it worked. We're being a fully digital cloud-based practice. It worked perfectly, and we'd always claimed it up to that point. But I guess lockdown was our true test as to sort of back up what we'd been claiming. And luckily, literally overnight, we were working from home as if nothing had happened. And it was good. It worked well. Microsoft Teams daily, sort of morning coffees together on Microsoft Teams to catch up and have a little chatter. And it worked okay. And we had our sort of VoIP phone systems, so clients didn't really notice much of a difference. To an extent. But I think everybody was sort of chomping at the bit, and nobody really wanted to say it. I think people were scared that they didn't want to speak up because everybody else loved working from home. And so I just said it, and I said, you know what, guys, I'm going to go back to the office. I'd like you all to join me, but I get it if you don't feel comfortable. And a week later, we were all back full time. So,
are you all in like full-time hours, or is it like a bit of a hybrid of a bit of working from home? How do you guys just to hear?
Yeah, we've always been pretty flexible. I've always said to everybody, look, let's just have some base hours. But if you ever need to flex that, I'm more than happy for that. If they ever need to be at home for whatever reason, work from home that afternoon or morning. So we all have pretty standard office hours to an extent. But if anybody needs to flex it or work from home ever, then they can. So yeah. But I think because we're a small team, we're quite a close-knit team. So we all like to be together, sort of help each other out. So yeah, I hope anyway. That's what they tell me.
Yeah, that's okay. I'd say, well, it sounds. I saw you guys on LinkedIn go out for a meal and stuff. So during the lockdown, which is always nice to see those types of group gatherings. So it's good. So you mentioned you're purely cloud and digital, the way you sort of done that, the way you've engineered the firm to be longer term. So you mentioned Xero, what other apps and systems are you regularly using, whether that's for clients or whether that's internal? What's your sort of stack that you like to use?
Do you know what? I didn't realize how big our app stack was until we're part of your app advisory course, and until I started listing it out onto a document, it went on and on and on. And I think that's why I first initially liked the idea of your course when I first saw it, because I knew we were using apps, I knew we were cloud and digital, and I knew it was an area that we were probably different to most firms, certainly in Bristol, of using all of these apps and tech, and without, I don't know, forming that into a service or a
Yeah,
sellable sort of marketable area of the firm. Um, and so I think we then got to the point of the course where we had to list our app stack, and then I really realized how much we use. So probably every area that a business or finance function would need, we already were using app and tech.
yeah.
We just didn't fully, I guess, embrace it or realize it. We
I'll
were
tell
just
anyone.
using it.
I'll
Yeah, we
tell
were just sort of
people.
solving problems as we went,
Yeah,
for clients over the last year or two, and introducing ourselves naturally to these apps as we went, and implementing them to businesses, always for free, which, kick myself now.
yeah,
And at the time, I was sort of saying to myself as well as the team, it's a good learning curve for us. Let's not charge, because we're getting to learn this knowledge and research, and we can then use that in the future. And I saw it as more of an education
yeah,
situation as opposed to a chargeable service.
yeah.
And so over time, as I said, we've been introduced to all of these apps for every industry that you could imagine. And it's only recently, as I said, now we're starting to sort of try to market it and have it as a sort of sellable service now.
So,
Um,
and a differentiator as well in terms of,
mm,
I think lots of people say, oh, we're a partner of this particular cloud accounting vendor, but I think some actual metrics of this is what we've done, this is who we've implemented this for, this is the gains they got from it is really interesting. So, are you using Receipt Bank or HubDoc in sort of those sort of core apps? What are the ones you're sort of using pretty regularly?
so we have what we call the basic apps, which every client pretty much has. So Zero, Receipt Bank, um, Bright Pay Cloud as well now.
Yeah.
So we have sort of our baseline, which every client has, and it's more integrated into our sort of basic way of working.
Mm-hmm.
So a new client comes on board, set them up on Zero, set them up on Receipt Bank, and Bright Pay, and we have that as a baseline. And then, slowly now we're developing the way we do it, but we then look into the client a bit deeper and see if there's any other apps that can sort of wrap around them and help them out anymore. But yeah, certainly Zero and Receipt Bank are basics. I don't think we'd be able to work without those two now, hand in hand. And we're slowly adding a couple more to the sort of basic lines. So things like Xavier we've added now,
Yeah.
and we're sort of slowly introducing. So yeah, it's the baseline is quite funny to watch, because it's slowly expanding
Absolutely.
as what we're offering as a basic to everybody. And futurely, we're slowly using more and more now. But again, as I said, before we start doing that for free too much, we need to develop this into a service, because it's really easy to just think of these apps as ways to save us time, as opposed to seeing apps as a way to sort of build and improve clients and their businesses. And that's when it becomes a sellable service as opposed to just an internal education.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you are right. There's a point where we value these things as education to ourselves, and we're going to improve ourselves. And that is, I think for definite, there is that. It's just agreeing a cut-off of how long are we going to do this as an internal. So you mentioned things like Receipt Bank and futurely. If you're going to use those regularly, then it's worth investing some time, because eventually they're going to be inherent in the standard stuff that all of your clients get. Then you start to commercialize it. I think where it's difficult is I always use like the milkman. A milkman rings you and says, I want a system. You learn about all the milkman systems, then you never speak to a milkman ever again. It's like wasted effort on that point. But ironically, we have had some milkmen contact us recently, so it's become a bit of a no. So I have to change. I've got to change that case study. But essentially, I think if you're learning a particular type of app and it's going to be an ongoing type of engagement with clients who are going to need it, then there is worth spending some time and understanding the app and how you can deliver it. But then longer term, it has to turn into some sort of productized service that you can start to make sure you're getting your return on, because that's not part of what most people would consider accountancy standard that you've paid for the last 10, 15 years to an accountant for. So
Yeah.
And are you doing, what about things like the accounts production and stuff like that? Is there any tools that you've really picked up in that space that you use internally? Because this is an interesting one where we've got practice management, accounts production, onboarding, people are still, I don't think there's anything clear that everyone's all picked up. I think everyone's got their own sort of jigsaw of how they do that.
Yeah, I think that's also a big lesson I've come to learn is I always and I guess I would imagine a lot of sort of small practice owners have this issue as well, is I always used to try too much to compare myself to other practices. So I always used to just presume that all the other practices using app and text and cloud had this perfect system in place, and I was completely lost, and I was the only one who didn't really understand what I was doing. And I think over the last 12 months, I've come to realize from the different groups I'm in that everybody has their own bespoke puzzle, as you've said. They've picked their own pieces that work best for them, and they've put them together. And there is no one size fits all. You know, it's about using the software that you work with best, that you understand best, and that you and the team can work with efficiently, as opposed to forcing software into the practice that you and the team just don't get or like. And that's been quite a big lesson learned. So, I mean, I actually laughed earlier at VT Transaction, but for a lot of my year-end accounts, I still use VT Final. It's like an Excel-based final accounts production thing. And the reason it works well for me still is it's very flexible, it's very editable, and it's very easy to sort of carry on year to year. So I still predominantly use that for year-end accounts, but I'm slowly trying to introduce myself to zero tax. The way I see sometimes these things is that when they're first introduced, there's going to be a lot of clunks and flaws. My issue with that is sometimes that can create longer times and more inefficiencies until they've been ironed out. So I'm probably going to wait maybe another 6 to 12 months until I fully dive into that. But I've tried out of a few and it works well for specific ones that are very basic and not much to them. It worked really well and it was quick. But the moment you start to introduce any type of complexities, I think there's still a few clunks in the system.
I agree, and I think so. It sounds like you're a bit of a lurky. You're aware of it, and you will go at some point. It's just picking your time and hearing enough about the products being tested and rigorously ran through enough for it to be fit your scenarios. Yeah,
I think that's what is probably again another sort of missed message with tech and cloud accounting is these softwares, they're not miracles, and they only improve and develop over time. It's the only way it can. It's through people using it and people bringing up issues and then getting fixed. And I'm not pretending I'm a tech expert, but that seems to be the way tech works. And so, you know, with time it will improve. I think I was at XeroCon probably 2 years ago now, and it got announced, and I was sat there like so excited. I thought this is going to save me hours. I didn't think 2 years on I'd still not be using it. But I think, as I said, it's been lessons learned in the last year that actually sometimes it's best not to just jump into a new piece of software until it's had time to develop. Yeah,
I think as well, it's really interesting what you're saying there about this isn't miracle stuff. It's like on the road, it's progressive. It'll happen at some point, but not necessarily the minute you pick it up. And the other thing that I find this a lot with accounting firms, and I think this is less for you because you've defined your process around digital ways of working, but I think some firms pick up these tools and they amplify a poor process. So sometimes the tech gets the blame for what was actually just not a very good process, full stop. The process needs redefining, and then the tech adopted with a new process. And I see that so often. So for you, it's probably not such an issue because you've defined from the start that you're going to be working with cloud and digital tools predominantly. But for other firms who are transitioning, that's really hard for them to do, and it just amplifies a poor process a lot of the time.
I think I found that with Receipt Bank actually was quite a big sort of area in that issue, because when I first adopted Receipt Bank, my initial gut feeling was this needs to be more of an internal app, and I saw a lot, and it probably does work for some people doing it in the opposite way, where they sell it as a benefit and they sell it to the client. I've never fully understood how or why, because I guess if they use Receipt Bank themselves, then by all means sell it to them. You're just selling somebody a piece of software. But if you're using it internally, I struggle to understand how we can sell an internal process app to a client, because at the end of the day, and clients have picked up on this themselves. I'm sure every firm has had a client who's used this line, but they always say, well, if it's just making your life easier, why are you charging me for that? So, and back in the day, I used to sort of hear people were charging for it. And so I thought I had to. and it never fit right with me. And then eventually I decided, you know what, it might be against the grain, but I'm not going to sell receipt bank to clients. I'm going to swallow the cost, because the time cost we get back is way bigger than the software cost for us. And I think sometimes you can trip yourself up trying to sell software to clients too much, because they will then start to question. And then that's when the questions of, okay, well, what value are you adding, instead of just charging me for all of these apps.
Well, I think the key point there is that it sounds like you, like from selling receipt bank, some firms do and some firms don't. Some firms swallow it and some people do sell it. And there's no right or wrong, because it's your firm, it's what you're happy doing, and you've got to explain to the client. So if you're not fully behind the move of charge for it, it's probably going to be really hard to actually talk a client into it. So yeah. I think this is the beauty of this. You can pick these tools, and some can be part of your standard offering and others can be additional, and you can make those decisions for yourself as a firm.
Yeah, absolutely. It is about the confidence, I think, exactly. And I think that's when it hit me, is that I had a meeting, and it's always going to stick in my mind, where the client said to me, why are you charging me for a receipt bank? What does it do? And I panicked and I said, well, it makes it quicker for us to process your expenses. So why are you charging me for that?
Yeah.
And I genuinely had that moment where I said, do you know what, you're right. And they liked the honesty, and that turned into a really honest conversation.
Yeah.
But it was from that meeting that I sat and thought, do you know what, if anyone else asks me that again in the future, I'm not going to be able to argue the case, because I don't feel like it is right. I agree with them. Okay. And it was from then on, I completely changed my mindset, because as you said, it's being comfortable that choose what you and your firm want to do, and then have that confidence behind it to explain.
Yeah. I think you've got to take other points of view in and listen and understand, but you've got to make the final decision as to how comfortable, like you say, you are with the process and the service and the pricing that you're going to offer in and around that. So, okay, so that's quite interesting. Went on a few little tangents there, which was really good. I'm pretty valuable for the people listening. And obviously you've picked up on this evolution of cloud accounting, and app advisory. So what's the future for you, do you think, with those processing services? You've mentioned you did a lot for free. Are you looking to sort of commercialize that a little bit more now?
Yeah, we was having this conversation internally yesterday, and we found we were at this crossroads probably about 12 months ago, where there was this big blow up in the industry of we must stop doing as much year-end accounts and tax, and we must all move to advisory work. And it was this big panic. It was like mass panic in the industry of what does advisory even mean?
Yeah.
But we've all got to do it somehow. And I felt like we had sort of two crossroads of we either, if you weren't already offering things like forecasting and management accounts, you had to learn how to and start. And that's what this advisory work was. Or you had to go maybe a bit more down the cloud route of apps and cloud and tech. We were already doing forecasting and management accounts. So I didn't feel like there was this big road there for us, because we were always pretty much on it. So we slowly started to sort of put into app and tech more time and effort and energy. And we've then naturally gone down that route. And as I said, it's been probably a longer journey than it should have been, but we've spent 12 months getting to know all of these apps, implementing them into businesses for clients for free, educating ourselves on them. But I think we almost had to do that to an extent to be more confident. Again, it's that word of confidence to go and advise. Because, you know, there's nothing worse than sitting in front of a client and saying, oh yeah, and I've heard about this great piece of software that will solve that issue. And they say, great, how does it work? No idea. Because then how can you sell it? But
and we're going to charge you a few $100 as well to implement it or
exactly.
understand if it's the right. And so that there's definitely that building that confidence and that education, like you say, is really important.
You have to. I mean, you spend so long educating yourselves and training to become an accountant to offer that service. So you can't expect to just overnight offer a brand new service in a new area with no training or history of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, yes, we probably have lost out a lot of money in the last 12 months that we could have charged, but I wouldn't have had the confidence to charge it. Yeah. And that could have ruined relationships at the same time. So now we're in a place where we can go into an industry. I think I put on LinkedIn yesterday, I went into a hotel this week, potential client, and the first laughable part was he said, I've been put onto this Xero software and it's taken so much more time to do everything. And I couldn't help but laugh in front of the client. And I did apologize and explain why. And we had a bit of a laugh of it together. But I've had experience of hotels where I've sort of done the research in the past for free, implemented and trained on the apps for free. But it meant yesterday I could go in and say, right, okay, for staffing and HR, you can use Deputy, and for bookings and systems, you can use this. And there was the confidence behind it. I wasn't stumbling. I didn't say, oh, I'm sure there is out there somewhere, because they don't believe you. And so, yeah, I'm you have to get that fine line of educating yourself and doing a certain amount for free while you are learning. But then, try to create a sellable service as quick as possible.
I think as well, it's that confidence, right? As well, that does go across to the client or the prospect that you're speaking to. Or this person does know what they're talking about, and that can get sniffed out a little bit. So not necessarily you've got to know all the apps in terms of ins and outs of features, but there is a set of systems that we can probably look into, and I know a couple of them straight off will cover the core of what you're saying here. And I think the other thing which is interesting is, I think it's setting expectations as to what people will get is really important. So yes, I know about this, and here's a service, so this is what you get, and this is the price. Being able to do that as well does mean that it starts to fit together. I've got the knowledge, and here's a service, and here's the process, and here's the price. All of a sudden starts to just go off the tongue, as opposed to be like, right, I'm going to come back to you, in about 3 weeks when I've thought about this and I can get some downtime. So it's really just pulling it all together. So there's definitely education, which you're right. It's hard just to say, we're going to do this tomorrow. And then it's just pulling all the other parts together with that.
I think that was a big point actually that tripped us up a lot in the early days, because we would have heard about an app in a certain area and said, oh, we know this app, and you'd sit there and accidentally make false promises about what this app can do, and the moment it didn't do certain things they needed it to, they would come back and say, well, you said it could do this. And it was that naivety of just expecting apps to work perfectly and be the magic cure for everything. And again, that's a learning curve. And yes, that does come with time and experience of using apps and getting to actually know these apps and use them. But it is also just that learning point of don't overpromise until you're confident and comfortable with an app.
Yeah, you're much better under promising and then over delivering. And I suppose it's a bit like you were saying when you start off with, you're going back to your old firm, when you go out and do networking and you sold the dream and then they turned up and it wasn't the dream you'd sold, right? And now you've created the dream that you want to sell and can deliver that. I think it can get into that way. I'm sure, I hear the phrase like, oh, there's an app will do that. And I'm like, I'm not sure there is. And I wouldn't be saying that. I'd be saying there's a bunch of apps we can look at and see if we can help out. But I don't know if it's going to fit. And then you're much better on, putting on the back burner as to whether it's actually going to do everything they want it to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's being confident to say, actually, do you know what? There's a few apps that do something similar, but it's not a good fit for you. So I would actually probably, I think about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I recommended somebody stuck to Excel because there just wasn't an app that would create the efficiencies that would be worth doing it for.
Yeah, but I'm definitely with you. There's always going to be, in my view, there'll be periods or certain clients who just don't have a plethora of solutions to choose from for whatever reason, certain scenarios, certain processes internally, certain sectors. And you're dead right. You're better just saying, actually, you're on our radar that you want to do something, but right now there's nothing there, and we'll keep an eye on that radar. And if something comes in, we'll open up the conversation again and come back to you. But you're dead right. I also find sometimes that people might ring up for a piece of tech and actually it's a process change they need. There's a process they need around how their finance function needs to change, not really the tech. And there's value in that, and that's still something to be, made some revenue from. But it's not always going to be a piece of tech which is going to fix every single problem we come up against. But it's just a good opportunity. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the other thing that experience will then also bring you is realizing actually is not always just about the tech or the issue. Sometimes it's about the size of the business or the personality of the owner.
Completely.
And that can completely throw what could be a brilliant dream piece of app and resolution to an issue. But if they're not the right personality, you can already call it a day with that app, which sometimes is a hard pill to swallow for a cloud firm like us, where we know there's a perfect app to solve an issue, but we know as a person is never going to work, and we don't want to be the firm to sort of push that app to them, and it could work, and then we have that constant frustration with the client of knowing it can work, but you've not just taken into account who they are as people up front.
Yeah.
And again, that's something that only comes with time and experience of using these apps, is realizing what personalities will fit apps just as much as the problem and the tech.
You're dead right. We find there's two, when we converse with SMEs, there's two types which come in terms of potential problematic. It's the know-it-alls who like, oh yeah, I know this, and you know, it's sort of almost, you feel like you're selling them everything they already know, but they never actually implement it. That's the first one. The second one is the one who just wants things done now, and it's impossible to redefine a process, no matter how small it might be, whether it's just a basic receipt bank implementation. Yeah, can we get this done tomorrow? And it's all on their terms, their timeline. We just back off straight away, because we'll go, just let you know it's going to be X amount of weeks before we can engage, and X amount of weeks before we can get there. And if they're going, oh, you know, I'll pay more, we'll do it tomorrow, it doesn't really matter, because they're just not, they just want a quick fix and don't really want to solve maybe the process problems around it or train properly. And that's just going to be on our radar forever and a day as a bit of a painful client, really. So
do you find as well it's the ones that you don't want and try to overprice to get rid of, that always are more than happy to pay double the fee?
Yeah, they're just coming back. Like we had one we quoted, and we were like, they'll never go for it, and they didn't. And then they came back like 18 months later, having done loads of research, and said, now we want that. It looks really good value. And we're like, well, actually, we're going to up the price again. They went with it. So just sometimes, you know, you just can't. Sometimes it's better to say, you know, I just don't think we're compatible.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather, because everyone says, I've just had some zeros to the end of the quote and see what happens. Well, you know, your worst fears might actually happen from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you think now, where you're at, we talk about confidence, you're going to have the confidence to tell people that this is an additional service, this sort of app research, app implementation, training, support? You feel you're in a position now to start talking whenever you start to implement this, but you're going to be saying it's an additional service, a different process that we follow.
Yeah, that was doing the app advisory course with yourselves was the main area where I wanted to educate myself and learn and develop, was how to price, how to approach pricing, and how to form it into a sellable service.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest area that I have had to develop and learn, and it's still in development, and we're not there yet. But we're definitely now in a different mindset of, okay, well, we need to charge for that. And it's probably going to be a hybrid of either just sort of increasing the bookkeeping management to incorporate managing apps that might already be in place, or whether it is introducing these sort of new services and fees of finding the right app and then implementing it. I think it's going to be a hybrid of both. And I think what we've actually seen, I don't know if anybody else has, but clients more and more seem to have been researching and finding apps themselves. And the worst case scenario, which is happening way more frequently than I like, is they're starting to implement them themselves. Starting to buy them, set them up, and connect them to Xero. And the next thing you know, we go on the next day to do bookkeeping, and suddenly there's this new app on there, and it's bringing in information from left, right, and center, which is all wrong. And we're finding out a lot more. I mean, certainly more than a year or two ago. But more and more in the last few months, people are finding these new online banking apps, these new expense cards. We had somebody yesterday who set up a load of Shopify accounts and Stripe. And I think I said to them, you know, what do you use to sell your products online? And they said Stripe. And I said, no, that's how you take payments. What do you use to sell? Oh, I'm not sure. And they've set it all up and they've done something somewhere. And then suddenly it's a whole new service of fixing what somebody's done already themselves. So that's going to be an interesting area we need to look at and develop.
I'm going to be talking about this in one of the future accelerator sessions that we're doing actually on the program. But what has definitely happened over this COVID period is people have had maybe some time where there's been down periods, and we're seeing these DIYers appear. And I think you'll know from the discussion we had, I'm a big fan of like cloud accounting health checks and finance function reviews. I think they're really important. But certainly this online selling world, it feels to me that there's two types of health checks. There's an optimization health check. So you've been on this system, no real changes for the last year or 2 years. And it's about just updating the tech, updating the processes and adopting some of the new features. There's also a project rescue, which is a health check. So you've put yourself on these systems in the last 3-6 months. The data's all over the shop. That's not a health check, that's a project rescue, which is almost the same price as going to be implementing it, in all honesty, because you're going to be unpicking to put back in and re-engineer their design processes.
Yeah.
So there's going to be definitely 2 of these which come up, because we've definitely seen more DIYs. And I think what's you're just talking about, the more educated clients starting to turn up. If you think like Stripe is pretty much, you pay for Stripe in some form in a consumer way, you using Stripe or a PayPal, that's well known. And I do think the banks have worked really hard. The challenger banks, Tide and Starling, are on the TV pretty regularly. They've made it so easy to engage that these clients are going to turn up with some understanding that there's a better way of doing things.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be mega important going forward.
We're getting a lot of, we've had like a sudden wave of people who are saying, I'm on free agent because I was given it for free by a certain bank. And we're getting waves of those. And they've said, but it's been great because we've realized how easy bookkeeping is. And I instantly just want to put the phone down, but it takes everything to say, okay, well, we can have a look at that and whether you are doing it correctly or not. And that always used to be a difficult conversation of clients who did their own bookkeeping and having that difficult, tricky conversation of almost accusing them that they have no idea what they're doing. But we're going to start seeing that, I think, with cloud and apps now, of clients who say, oh, I know how to connect that. I know how to set that up. It's easy peasy. And then we're having to have that difficult conversation of not just about bookkeeping, but about apps and setups and connections. And
I think, like you said, those clients now go and find these apps and connect up. There's 2 conversations. There's one, what are you doing in the first instance? And maybe there's something around the scope of agreement that we're only going to work with these setup. Our engagement is only valid for this setup. If you introduce something else, we need to re-engage and understand what you're doing. I think the second point is that they adopt this. You find out there's some sort of check 2-3 months down the line to say, is this working? Is the data in good nick? What's going on with that? So I think there's a couple of things. Right, to wrap up, which has been, I think, a brilliantly valuable session, Ben. I think you've been really very generous with your insights and your experience and what's worked and what hasn't. But your favourite bit of tech within accounting, or that you use personally that you couldn't, it's worked wonders for you, what is it?
Oh, good question. Do you know what? I think I hadn't appreciated how much I use it and rely on it until a few months ago. But I'm a big fan of Accountancy Manager.
Right.
I spent probably the first 2 years trialing every practice management software you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I think I went to Accountancy Manager, then I left and I went back and tried a few others. And again, I think it's probably an education and experience thing of learning that there isn't a perfect fit.
Yeah.
And it's about making it work for you. And when I realized that and put that time and effort in, it's an odd one. It's probably an odd choice that nobody expected. But I think the way it can manage and control a digital and cloud-based practice is brilliant. So yeah, I would probably go with that. From an admin point of view, it certainly makes life 10 times easier.
Well, if they listen to this, I'm sure they'll send some swag over to you or something like that.
That's the only reason I said it, Matt, to be honest.
If we can't do these physical conferences, we've got to get swag somehow, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Accountancy Manager is is one of your core
at
pieces
the moment. It's
yeah.
probably a hot app at the moment, yeah.
Perfect. Well, Ben, that brings us to the end of this episode. It's been great to have you on. As I say, really thankful for the insights.
No
I've loved working with you and watching you, and it's been great seeing you 3-4 years ago, re-engage in the last 3-6 months and seeing where you're at. And obviously, we've talked a little bit about your plans today and offline. So it's been great to see. So I think you're a firm to watch in this cloud adoption and movement.
Yeah, let's hope so.
But yeah, thanks a lot for your time, Ben.
No worries.
Thanks a lot for today. Cheers.
No worries. Speak to you soon.
Cheers.